Imagine being in a room where no one notices you. Neither repulsion nor attraction, just absence. You're there, but it's as if you don't exist. And now imagine that in that same room, a man walks in. Not the most handsome, not the richest, not the tallest, and in less than 5 minutes, he becomes the center of gravity of the place. Everyone notices his presence. Women notice him before they even understand why. And men, even if silently, recognize his invisible authority. What does he have that you don't? What is vibrating around him that you lack? The answer lies in a territory rarely explored seriously, the invisible archetype. The energy you emanate before you open your mouth. The psychological signature your presence imprints on those around you, and which most of the time, you're not even aware you're transmitting. This is what we call silent sex appeal. The seduction that precedes language, the biology that precedes aesthetics, identity before performance. We're not talking about superficial charm, ready-made phrases, or NLP techniques. That's the surface. What we'll explore here is the psychic structure that shapes your presence. Because what activates female desire is not objective aesthetics, but rather the subjective perception of emotional, carnal, and symbolic value. And this perception is constructed by codes that operate at an unconscious level. A woman doesn't rationally decide whether you're desirable. She feels. And she feels because her body communicates truths that her mouth hasn't even articulated yet. Therefore, to understand what truly enhances your sex appeal, we need to move beyond the aesthetic realm and delve into the realm of archetypal psychodynamics. And herein lies the first contradiction. Many men who try to be more attractive assume they need to feign confidence, feign security, feign desire. But anything feigned communicates tension, and tension communicates threat. The female instinct, shaped for millennia to identify danger in micro-expressions, detects this instantly, even if she can't explain why. Robert Greene in The Art of Seduction unravels this phenomenon with surgical precision. He not only maps the behaviors that generate attraction, but also identifies the psychic energies that sustain these behaviors, the seductive archetypes. Greene presents 9 primary archetypes, which are not roles to be imitated, but essences to be discovered and amplified. They are symbolic codes that exist within every man, but in some, they remain dormant. Others access them masterfully, and these are the ones who dominate the game without playing. Among these archetypes are figures such as the charismatic, the rake, the natural, the dandy, the idealist, and the enchanter. Each of them represents a distinct way of activating female desire. The rake, for example, is the passionate seducer who overflows with desire for each woman as if she were unique, and this, for the female ego, is an aphrodisiac. The natural seduces with its childlike lightness and genuine spontaneity, evoking in the feminine unconscious the pleasure of secure vulnerability. The dandy, on the other hand, breaks the conventions of rigid masculinity and creates an aesthetic ambiguity that magnetizes the eye. The idealist, the Casanova archetype, seduces through the creation of fantasies, through the ability to project the woman in her greatest brilliance, making her feel rare, unique, divine. But the key isn't choosing an archetype like one would a carnival costume. The fatal mistake beginners make is trying to perform an archetype that isn't compatible with their nature. The result is discomfort, rigidity, and a forced presence that repels rather than attracts. The secret lies in identifying which archetype already vibrates within you, even if timidly, and amplifying it authentically. When there is coherence between your body, your language, your tone of voice, and your dominant archetype, the effect is magnetic. Hugh Hefner is an emblematic example of this truth. Before becoming a sex symbol, he was a shy, introspective young man with an asymmetrical face and no obvious heartthrob traits. But Hefner discovered, intuitively, that his power lay in something others overlooked, the way he made women feel. He adopted an inclusive, almost dreamlike language that placed the woman within a shared fantasy. Instead of saying, "You're beautiful," he would say, "We'd be amazing together, don't you think?" This phrase changes the game. It doesn't assert, it invites. It activates the imagination, and imagination, when stimulated, creates emotional connection and sexual tension. This type of language is typical of the enchanter archetype, one who dominates the space with words that lull, welcome, and seduce without pressure. And that's exactly what makes a man dangerous, in the best sense. He doesn't force anything. He simply plants mental seeds that blossom in a woman's mind as spontaneous desire. Hefner transformed this code into an empire. The first issue of Playboy, with Marilyn Monroe on the cover, wasn't just a magazine, it was a symbolic proposition. To live in a world where pleasure was refined, aesthetic, and transgressive at the same time. Now think of Casanova. He wasn't the most handsome, nor the richest, but he was considered one of the greatest seducers in history. Why? Because he understood what no man of his time understood. Female desire stems from the fantasy of being understood. Casanova didn't seduce by saying what a woman wanted to hear. He seduced by saying what she didn't know she needed to hear. He activated zones of insecurity and transformed them into praise. If she wore braces, he complimented her smile. If she hid her legs, he extolled the mystery of what wasn't shown. Casanova personified the idealist, the archetype that transforms flaws into fascination. But what do Hefner, Casanova, Adam Sandler, and so many others who, despite being ordinary, exert undeniable fascination, have in common? What unites them is that they all discovered their inner magnetic axis, the hidden source of sex appeal. They didn't try to copy James Bond. They didn't try to look like Brad Pitt. They mastered their own energy and made it a universal language. And here comes the turning point. You need to stop searching for external formulas and start digging into your internal matrix of seduction. Because, believe me, it exists. Perhaps dormant, perhaps muffled by years of insecurity and comparison, but it's there. And your first step isn't to change your appearance. It's to align your presence. What does your presence communicate when you enter a room? Comfort or tension, desire or need, security or anxiety, every movement, every silence, every look reveals something. Nietzsche said that what is done for love is always beyond good and evil. But he also said that happiness is the feeling that your power is growing. And that's what seduction offers. Not just conquest, but inner power. When you activate your invisible archetype, you're not just more desired. You feel more alive. You don't seek validation, you generate impact. And in that moment, everything changes. And perhaps the greatest enemy of your seduction today isn't your aesthetics, your money, or your height. It's the dissonance between the man you are and the character you try to be. When this dissonance is healed, desire begins to work in your favor. Women notice, men respect, and the world finally begins to react to your presence. Because ultimately, sex appeal isn't a trick, it's an alignment, a fusion of energy, narrative, and presence. And the first piece of this puzzle is the invisible archetype. Discover it, master it, and the rest. The rest will seem like magic. But magic, when understood, is just science you haven't yet mastered. Magic, when understood, is just science you haven't yet mastered. And when we talk about sex appeal, there's a science few men dare explore in depth: the biology of sexual perception. If in the previous chapter we unveiled the power of the invisible archetype, what you project psychologically, now we delve into the visible surface, but strategically. Because the body communicates as much as the mind, and it can be your greatest ally, or your silent betrayer. The brutal truth is that the female gaze responds to biological signals before responding to any words. This doesn't mean you need to be beautiful. It means you need to learn to amplify the visual signals of genetic and sexual value that her body has learned to recognize over millennia. Seduction begins in the eyes, and not her eyes, but yours. Because before she sees you, you're already seeing yourself through the way you present yourself to the world. Let's start by demystifying aesthetics. Society sells the idea that there is a universal standard of beauty, but female biology tells a different story. Studies like those conducted by David Perrett of the University of St. Andrews show that women are attracted not only to symmetrical faces or perfect features, but to traits that indicate high testosterone levels, emotional stability, and genetic health. In other words, you may not be handsome, but if your face emits signals of strength, structure, and authenticity, you activate the female sexual radar. The famous experiment conducted by the Royal Society Open Science in 2020 tested exactly this. 37 men were photographed with and without beards, and their images were manipulated to appear 30% more feminine and 30% more masculine. The result was clear. Faces with beards and slightly masculine features were considered the most attractive. Why? Because beards, among other factors, indicate sexual maturity, stable testosterone levels, and, most importantly, security. But make no mistake, beards aren't just aesthetic, they're symbolic. They communicate strength. A bearded jaw conveys tribal, ancestral power. And even if you can't grow a thick beard naturally, there's technology to help. Minoxidil, for example, has been used by thousands of men with visible results. What's more, you can style your beard strategically according to your facial shape. A rounder face can benefit from a square, well-defined beard. Longer faces can use lateral volume for balance. This is visual engineering, and you need to start thinking about your appearance like an architect thinks about a monument. But the face is just the beginning. The body communicates what the mind hasn't yet dared to say. And among the most powerful codes is the shoulder-to-waist ratio. Men with broad shoulders and a narrow waist activate a biological signal of virility and protection. It's not just a matter of aesthetics, it's a genetic memory. In ancient times, these traits were associated with the ability to fight, hunt, and protect. Today, they continue to communicate. I am capable of dominating the environment, and this, for the female instinct, is an aphrodisiac. To develop this structure, you don't need to become a bodybuilder. Just know where to focus your muscles: deltoids, shoulders, upper chest, and trapezius. These three muscle groups create the famous visual V, even if the rest of your body is developing. This is biological leverage. You focus on the 20% of your body that generates 80% of the visual impact. And beyond the physical, there's a second, often overlooked element: the rhythm of your movements. Men who are rushed, tense, and hyperactive convey anxiety. And anxiety is a sign of emotional instability, the greatest antidote to desire. Men who move cadencedly, who speak slowly, who occupy space calmly and firmly, convey control. And control in this game is power. Your every step should feel like a decision, every gesture a statement. Strategic slowness is a weapon of seduction. But the real revolution begins when you understand that scent is also a language. Yes, you can be remembered or forgotten by your scent. And we're not just talking about perfume. We're talking about pheromones, chemicals the body naturally releases that influence sexual attraction. The problem is that most men destroy their own pheromones without realizing it. How? By applying perfume to the wrong areas. The armpits and neck are areas rich in glands that release pheromones. When you apply perfume to these areas, you neutralize your natural body odor, and with it, part of your sexual signature. The ideal application is on the wrists, collarbones, and clothing. This way, the perfume blends with your base scent without overpowering it, creating a unique and unforgettable olfactory trail. And if you want to naturally increase your pheromone levels, start with your diet. Foods like citrus fruits, green vegetables, seeds, and high-quality proteins help with hormone production and the excretion of chemical compounds that enhance your natural odor. This isn't aesthetics, this is strategic chemistry. Now let's talk about style. And here, once again, we encounter a contradiction. Most men think style is about being fashionable. Nothing could be more useless. Style is about visual storytelling. The way you dress should amplify your archetype and communicate symbolic sexual presence. A dandy, for example, might wear flared jeans, silk shirts, elements that break down rigidity and create sensual ambiguity. The charismatic, on the other hand, benefits from structured pieces, clean cuts, and solid tones, because their energy lies in clarity, not excess. Dressing well isn't about impressing, it's about embodying a message. And the correct message is, I am a man who masters his own expression. A woman doesn't just fall in love with what she sees. She falls in love with how you choose to be seen. And this choice must be intentional, aesthetic, and strategic. But be careful. The biggest mistake a man can make when trying to improve his appearance is seeking external approval. When you dress or groom yourself expecting to be noticed, you send a subtle signal of emotional dependence. And this signal is interpreted as weakness. A woman senses it, and she backs away. On the other hand, a man who grooms himself as a ritual of personal power, who takes care of himself like a warrior sharpens his sword, conveys a kind of presence that is impossible to ignore. This is the essence of the visual formula, communicating sexual value before speaking. It's not about aesthetics alone, it's about symbolic construction. It's about using your body as a statement of value. Because ultimately, a woman isn't just evaluating your appearance. She's evaluating the story your body tells. And the question is, does your story arouse desire or pity? The French philosopher Roland Barthes said that the body is a text that the other reads before hearing a single word. And he was right. The body is the first narrative, and the way you inhabit it with style, scent, rhythm, and structure defines whether that narrative will be read with excitement or disinterest. So, start now. Redesign your visual architecture consciously. Study the mirror as if studying a map, because your reflection is the first invitation to desire. And if it's read with the right eyes, the rest of the game will simply follow. Your reflection is the first invitation to desire. But even the most powerful image fades if there's no substance behind it. And here we enter the final pillar of sex appeal: status and resources. The most misunderstood of all, the most coveted, the most feared. Because we live in a culture where a man's worth is often measured by the size of his bank account. And yet, how many times have you seen extremely wealthy men rejected by women who felt disconnected from them? The truth is that real status, what arouses genuine desire, is not in money, but in the perception of value. And value is something that can't be bought. Value is communicated. This is the brutal paradox. Men with less money, less fame, even less beauty, are often more desired than conventionally powerful men. Why? Because they've learned to generate an aura of emotional and social relevance, and this aura is more seductive than any imported car or designer watch. Let's go back in time. Italy, 1834. A poor, poorly educated young sailor is sentenced to death for participating in a failed revolution. His name? Giuseppe Garibaldi. Without fortune, without titles, without prestige, but with something few men possessed: an unshakable sense of mission. Fleeing to South America, he joins civil wars in Uruguay and Brazil, fighting against empires, challenging structures, and leaving a trail of respect wherever he goes. After 12 years of military campaigns, Garibaldi returns to Italy and becomes a symbol of freedom, honor, and courage. Women desired him not for his appearance, but because he represented an idea, a living archetype of brute strength and romantic idealism. And this combination is pure sexual dynamite. Love letters, declarations, fantasies. He became a legend, and all this without wealth, without formal status, only with reputation and presence. That's the point, because sex appeal linked to status doesn't depend on your position. It depends on the symbolic image you hold in people's minds. It's what social psychologists call emotional status, the perception that you occupy a position of respect, influence, or authority, even if you don't have money or fame. What matters isn't what you possess, but how you're perceived in relation to the environment you're in. And this perception can be constructed strategically. The first key is narrative positioning. Every man tells a story without realizing it. But seductive men tell the right story. They present themselves to the world as someone with a mission, a domain, a cause. They're not adrift, they're in motion. And motion attracts. When a woman senses that you're on a journey, that you're building something, that you live intensely, she associates this with value. And value generates excitement. The second key is cross-validation. People who are admired by others automatically spark interest. This is the halo effect. It works like this. If you enter a room and are greeted with respect by influential figures, your presence immediately shines. If others listen to you attentively, call you by name, acknowledge you publicly, even informally, this activates a silent trigger of desire. That's why building your social circle matters. You don't need rich friends. You need loyal friends, environments that value you, contexts where you not only exist, but are needed. Because being needed is sexier than being popular. The third key is strategic verbal scarcity. Men who talk too much about themselves convey insecurity. Those who speak little but precisely create an air of mystery and command. Women instinctively want to understand more. Well-placed silence isn't absence. It's an invitation. It suggests depth. It says there's more here than you can see. But be careful. This isn't arrogance. It's inner mastery. It's the kind of posture that says, I'm not here to prove anything. I'm here because I chose to be. And that kind of energy is unbeatable. Many try to buy this effect with cars, parties, and digital status. But these are easily erased glimmers. Respect, on the other hand. Respect can't be bought. It needs to be cultivated, and respect for sex appeal is like fuel for the fire. A respected man is, consequently, more desired. Because respect breeds security, and security creates space for desire to flourish. Do you want to be the guy who impresses with ostentation, or the one who seduces with presence? There's a stark difference between attracting attention and arousing desire. Attention is noisy, superficial, and requires constant effort. Desire is silent, deep, and feeds on your emotional consistency. Therefore, working on your emotional status means building an image that doesn't need to be defended. It stands on its own. Start with your posture. A man who walks firmly, who listens more than he speaks, who avoids unnecessary excuses, and who knows how to bow out gracefully, communicates social strength. Then move on to your projects. Women are attracted to busy men, not because they're unavailable, but because they're on a mission. When you have something greater than yourself, your value transcends the ego, and this generates respect, and respect becomes lust. The philosopher Ortega y Gasset said that man is himself and his circumstances. But men who become desirable go beyond that. They shape their circumstances. They leave their mark wherever they go. They are remembered even when they're not present, because their names carry history. And a woman who feels she's standing before a man of history, even if still in the making, feels desire. You don't need war to be a Garibaldi, but you do need an internal war won. You need scars. You need vision. You need discipline. Because these things truly communicate status. Not credit card status, but the status felt in a look, in a handshake, in the silence between sentences. This is what activates the most primal feminine instinct, to recognize a man who can protect her, not just physically, but emotionally and socially. And finally, an uncomfortable truth. A man who doesn't build status will always be dependent on his looks or his smooth talk, and both have an expiration date. Emotional status, on the other hand, is renewed with every action, every word, every conscious decision. So, stop obsessing over immediate wealth, and get into the game of lasting respect. The most desired man isn't the most accessible. He's the most necessary, the one who occupies a place no one else can. And that place can only be achieved with integrity, vision, and presence. When you understand this, money will be just a bonus, attraction, a byproduct, and sex appeal, inevitable. Some men spend their lives trying to prove their worth. Others learn to make the world feel it. If you've made it this far, understand one thing. You now carry a power that 99% of men ignore. Sex appeal isn't a formula of ready-made phrases or a like-getting algorithm. It's an energetic field, a silently readable code that decides in seconds whether you'll be just another or the man she'll remember. You no longer have to choose between being invisible or being forced. You now know the 3 axes that sustain true desire. And more than that, you know how to awaken them, cultivate them, and transform them into an irresistible presence. First, the invisible archetype. You understand that no technique works if it contradicts your inner nature. That seduction without identity is just anxious performance. And that when you activate the right archetype, the one that matches your essence, you stop trying to be sexy and become necessary. Next, the visual formula, the science of appearance that speaks more than 1,000 words. It's not about being handsome. It's about knowing how to position yourself visually as a symbol of desire. Your beard, your gaze, your rhythm of movement, your choice of clothing, your scent, these aren't details. They're genetic language, and you've now mastered its alphabet. At last, you've accessed social ascension. The territory where insecure men stumble trying to appear powerful, while strategists build real respect. You've understood that status isn't money, it's perceived significance, and that the most desired man in the room is always the one who seems to have come from a higher purpose. And this is where the truth no one wants to face comes in. Knowledge without practice is ego in disguise. Knowing all this and not applying it is the modern equivalent of leading an army and never going into battle. So, if you feel that this code needs to be ingrained in you on a deeper, auditory, sensory, subconscious level, I need to introduce you to something not available to everyone. The audiobook, The Forbidden Manual, How to Trigger Desire in 60 Seconds, is the logical next step for those who understand the game. It's not a summary. It's not more of the same. It's a forbidden work because it shows exactly how to activate the trigger of desire in the first seconds of a real interaction, something few manage to do until the end of their lives. And the scariest thing? It works even if you don't have beauty, money, or status, because attraction responds to codes that lie beneath the surface. And that's what the manual teaches. This audiobook is the direct continuation of what you experienced here. If the video was the map, the manual is the complete arsenal. It was created to be listened to with headphones, in silence, as if it were a ritual. And each chapter was designed to reprogram your perception of yourself and how the world perceives you. You will learn to use your words as blades, your gaze as bait, your silence as authority. But be careful. This content is not for those looking for empty formulas. It's for men willing to abandon social mediocrity and become magnetic elements in any environment. If this speaks to you, you already know what to do. The link is there. The decision is yours. Because desire doesn't wait. It moves toward those who act. And if you think you've seen everything about seduction, then get ready to relearn how to be a man.